Hello again, and welcome to First Christian Church, Adult Fellowship Bible Study. We continue in our study of First Maccabees, found in the Old Testament Apocrypha. This is lesson number 11 from that book, and we will be covering the remainder of chapter 10, starting in verse 67 of that chapter, plus all of chapter 11. Recall from last time and earlier in this chapter 10 that we ended with a clash between two people battling Biden, if you will, to be king of the Seleucid Syrian Empire. Demetrius I, who was the current sitting king, and a new rival, Alexandria. They fought a battle, or a series of battles, in late 151 to the early summer of 150 BC. Demetrius was killed in one of those battles, and Alexander then took the throne and the name Alexander I. Alexander was supported by both the Maccabees, that is the Judean regime that was in power, and the Egyptians, being the Ptolemies. As a result, this new king raised Jonathan Maccabee in rank, where he now leads an army allied with the Seleucids, with duties to the Seleucids, plus his role of being defender of the Jews and political and spiritual leader of the Jews. Ptolemy, the Egyptian king, also signed a treaty with him, in which he confirmed that treaty by offering his daughter Cleopatra in marriage to the new king Alexandra. Things remained relatively calm in the Jewish side of things, albeit they were still in a civil war within their own country, but it was a cold war, you might say, at that time. But much unrest occurred elsewhere in the Seleucid Empire. And I say elsewhere in the empire, understand that Judea was part of the Seleucid Empire. It was part of a province. The date is now 148 to 147 BC. Alexander initially was popular, but proved among his people, but he proved to be a very inept ruler. He was unable to control other leaders in his empire, and the two easternmost satraps had succeeded completely from there. To complicate things more, a son from a previous king, Demetrius, that had died earlier in battle, one of his sons arrives on the coast with an army of mercenaries from Crete. This is a person who takes the name Demetrius II. He's only a 13-year-old boy, and his regent, governor, one of the satraps, was Polonus, and he actually holds the power. He was a satrap of the Slabadan to Judea region, which would have included then the area of that the Jews live in. And quickly he assembles a large army as loyalties shift away from Alexander. A number of people join under this new would-be king. However, Jonathan Maccabee remains loyal to Alexander I, and he and the Jews are taunted by Alexander, belittled by them, called what we would say in Kentucky hillbillies. Here, as it says, hill people, they challenge him. His governor then challenges them to battle. The exchange is covered in chapter 10, verses 69 to 73, and it's strongly similar to the dialogue that fits the story of David and Goliath. And scholars argue this is another effort by the writer of First Maccabees to tie Jonathan to David's dynasty, an obvious prerequisite that would be needed at that time if anybody was emerging as a messianic type figure among the Jews. We need to appreciate that Jonathan under Alexander's rule, has control over an army now, or a wing of the army, that is to be used to defend Alexander and not just to defend the Jews. And he can move outside Judea, and he does. In a bold and strong tactical move, he secures his rear at Joppa on the coast, then moves to cut off Apollonius, the leader of this young king-to-be's army, from the king's main army, before Jonathan then turns to do direct battle with him. Jonathan then moves to do this direct battle, attacking this army on the plains, but the Jews are ambushed by the cavalry of this group in their rear, which has mass archers with it, and they wreak havoc on the Jewish soldiers, who stay put and are able to shield themselves, but they take a lot of casualties in a process like that, and allow these horses to just wear themselves out. And then Simon, Jonathan's brother, comes in with a flanking movement and attacks Apollonius, his emperor phalanxes, and routs them, or at least breaks them up. And Jonathan then goes on to disperse this army and destroy temples in the area. And not only that, based on other histories, what little bit is said here, he really conducts a religious genocide against these people who are worshiping these other gods. He kills large numbers of them by fire and sword, it says here. He also extracts great booty from them. When Jonathan withdraws to Jerusalem, he is honored by King Alexander with the golden buckle, which was worn around their cloak, which officially allows you to instantly recognize he is a member of the king's kinsmen. So they've made a tie here that he's part of the family. And that ends chapter 10. Chapter 11 then opens with a plot by this Egyptian king Ptolemy, the sixth of Egypt, who's actually the father-in-law of Alexander, to annex the Seleucid Empire. Now that's the way it's written here in 1 Maccabees. However, several other histories, including the famous history of Josephus, do not support that. They portray, in Maccabees, they portray Ptolemy a very unflattering, much trickery and wicked man. But Josephus's history reports that Ptolemy came at Alexander's actual request. Alexander was having trouble controlling these satraps, so therefore he asked his father-in-law to come and help him. And when he gets there, Alexander has plotted to kill the Egyptian king. And when Ptolemy learns of this, he turns on Alexander and retrieves his daughter Cleopatra for her safety. Actually then gives her to the would-be king Demetrius II as a wife. Then they fight a battle, and Alexander I dies, and Demetrius II then takes power, supported by the Egyptian Ptolemies. And this is 145 BC. Ptolemy also dies just a few days later. Not sure whether this was related to the battle or just a normal death. Wasn't able to find that in my immediate sources. Jonathan uses their war as a time, though, even though he went out to help them for a while, then he withdraws and uses this as a time to try to take control of that citadel in Jerusalem, which, by the way, is still under the control of the Seleucids and opposition Jewish elements that are with them. He also meets with the new king Demetrius II because he has to have his ranks and everything reconfirmed. But elements from the citadel, Jewish elements from the citadel, are able to get out and to the king first, and they alert the king not to allow him to destroy that citadel. And so Historians of other sources other than the Maccabees make it clear that a condition of renewing Jonathan's high priesthood and leadership and military rank all were contingent upon him leaving that citadel as it was. He is reconfirmed in his high priesthood as his political leader and as a military leader. Things become comfortable under Demetrius II's reign, so he sees no need to maintain a large standing army and dismisses the Seleucid troops, but keeps the mercenaries. Very interesting. Not normally the thing you would think would be wise to do, and it turns out it's not wise. But other historians also report that Demetrius is also especially cruel on citizens around Antioch, who were the last sort of to hold out in support of Alexandria. So he's cruel towards these people, and problems develop in that large numbers of unemployed previous soldiers and these harassed citizens around Antioch then side with a new pretender to the throne who arrives on the scene, a 2-year-old son of Alexander I and Cleopatra. In other words, this kid's only 2 years old. Obviously, he can't do much, but that's the royal line that people are going to support. And this young son had for his protection when Cleopatra disappeared from the scene. They sent this young son to the Arabs for protection, and so he is now back on the scene. This young son carries the title Antiochus VI, and will have a short reign from 145 to 142 BC. His advisor or regent is a man called Trypho, who holds the power, obviously, in this case. Jonathan sends Jewish troops to help Demetrius II, the real king, to pacify this region around Antioch, and it ends up that the Jews do almost all the street-to-street fighting in those battles, where they again extol themselves, but in addition to that, they exert great carnage on the area, gain lots of booty, and actually plunder the place, bringing lots of wealth back to Judea. Josephus reports that Demetrius II was ungrateful to the Jews for coming and helping him stabilize the situation, to the point that he increases taxes on them and demands that several generations of back taxes be immediately due. This doesn't go well, and so one scholar puts it this way: the people felt like he is acting just like the father and his grandfather, other Seleucids had towards us Jews. You just can't trust a Seleucid king, is their sort of their idea, their stance. So they turn then against Demetrius II and join the army of the child king and the regent Trypho. They defeat Demetrius II in a series of battles, but the army of Demetrius II is still around, so it's more of a dispersion it out to the wonderlands. Jonathan then shifts his loyalty to Antiochus VI, the baby king, and Trypho, and goes into battle directly against Demetrius II. The new regime makes Jonathan a type of ruler, co-ruler, if you will, of this province that involved Lebanon and Judea. Acts as the satrap, so includes Samaria and some of those areas. And they name Simon, the governor of the brother of Jonathan, as governor. Jonathan then moves his army into northern Syria, well outside Judea, west of the Euphrates River, actually, to conduct battles on behalf of this baby king. But Jonathan has overextended himself, and remnants of Demetrius II's army get in behind him near the Sea of Galilee and cut him off from Judea. So he's got to turn a big part of his army around and go address that. And Simon and Jonathan are able to recapture the region and establish a series of strong forts in the area. They later move, scholars say, this move of him having to come back and defend and establish that area and establish those forts is again reminiscent of a previous Old Testament story, the story of Joshua, which again helps this position of who First Maccabees wants us to see Jonathan as this forerunner of David that's out there, and the key individual that is God's placed there to help the Jews at this time and place. The chapter closes with them back in Jerusalem. So that finishes chapter 11, and we'll continue in our study next week, moving into chapter 12 and maybe some other chapters may speed this up a little bit.